Hello, everyone. I'm Bruce Collins. This channel is Bruce Collins Reacts and Stuff. And I also have another channel called The Bruce Collins Show. I hope you can like and subscribe to both of these channels. In the meantime, we're going to talk about the strangest coincidences in history. And again, the YouTube channel is Top 5 Unknowns.
If you've ever thought about a friend of yours, only for them to call you moments later, you might think that there's a deeper meaning behind it. Or perhaps you'd see it as a mere coincidence. These types of events happen thousands of times every day, and yet we still don't know whether they hold any real significance, or if they're in no way connected. Led Zeppelin is undoubtedly one of the most famous rock bands in all of history. Their most iconic song, Stairway to Heaven, caused a lot of stir after it was released, as some people believe it had ties to Satanism. While Stairway to Heaven may be the first song that comes to mind when the band is mentioned, they had a long and successful run in the music industry, and today the band is seen as legendary among classic rock music fans. But not many people know that they played their first ever show under a different name. The band's guitarist, Jimmy Page, played for a band called the Yardbirds for 2 years before Led Zeppelin was formed. And in 1968, the other 3 members of this band decided to call it quits. Upon their departure, they left the rights to the band name to the band's manager, Peter Grant, and to Page, who immediately started looking for new musicians to take their place. He ended up recruiting singer Robert Plant, bassist John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham. And when they played their first show later that year, they were listed on the bill as the Yardbirds. But Plant was not the first choice to become the band's vocalist. He first considered the vocalist of the band Peter J. and the Jaywalkers, Terry Reid, but Reid was unavailable at the time and he suggested that Page get in touch with Plant, which turned out to be a great decision. John Bonham, who's considered by many to be one of the greatest drummers of all time, also wasn't Page's first choice on percussion, but it would be hard to imagine the band without his unique style. Quite unbelievably, Bonham never took any formal drumming lessons. He taught himself to play the drums from the age of 5 when he used common household items such as a bath salt container and an empty coffee tin to figure out different rudiments. He didn't own a drum kit until he was 15 years old, and later explained that he never showed an interest in taking lessons because he felt the feeling was far more important than technique, since it helps you create your own unique sound rather than learning the same lessons as every other drummer and ending up sounding just like them. His signature sound is perhaps best noted in the band's song Black Dog, which is about a dog that the band used to see walking around the Headley Grange studio grounds at night while they were recording there. They noticed that it would head out onto the grounds every night and then return in the morning, tired and slightly worse for wear, before repeating the same routine again the following day. The song is iconic for the fact that it uses an odd time signature compared to the guitar track. The drums are played in a normal 4/4 beat, while the guitar is played in 5/4, giving it a strange feel that has left many amateur drummers baffled. He's also the subject of a strange coincidence that took place at his grave when it was visited by a journalist from the Guardian newspaper. The grave is located at St. Michael's Church in Rushock, Worcestershire, England. Upon his arrival there, the photographer walked over to the gravestone, which is inscribed with the words, "He will always be remembered in our hearts. Good night, my love. God bless." But to his surprise, as he started taking a few photos, a black dog emerged as if out of nowhere, walked over to the grave, relieved itself, and then abruptly disappeared into the distance again. Michael Jackson, the enigmatic singer who remains a household name many years after his passing, was born on the 29th of August, 1958. He grew up in Gary, Indiana, and as most of us know, had a turbulent childhood. As a child, he sang with his brothers in a group called the Jackson 5, who were eventually signed to the Tamla Motown record label. But in 1970, he set out on his own to begin a solo career that would take the world by storm. His first solo album, entitled Bad, was released in 1987, and it was hugely successful. What followed was a career that most artists could only dream of, as he released album after album to rave reviews, and before long he had one of the biggest fan bases on the planet. He became known as the King of Pop, and today many still regard him as the biggest musical superstar of all time. His album Thriller is still the biggest-selling record of all time, as it sold over 70 million copies in the 40 years since its release. He's also featured in the Guinness Book of World Records as the pop star who supported more charities than any other, the most Grammy Awards won in a single year, and as the most successful artist of all time. He was known to be an incredible dancer with his signature move, the moonwalk, becoming famous in 1983, after he performed it on the Motown 25th anniversary special while performing the song Billie Jean. During his long career, he won 13 Grammy Awards and was nominated a staggering 26 times, leading to over 500 million album sales throughout the years. But he was, however, also seen as a controversial figure at times, as he was very eccentric and lived in near isolation. It's been suggested that his bizarre...
What's sad is how much money he went through. Towards the end, it was almost like he was going bankrupt.
behavior was brought on by an unfortunate accident that coincidentally occurred exactly halfway through his life, and it left him traumatized for years after the fact. On the 27th of January, 1984, Michael was shooting a commercial for Pepsi at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, and during one take, something went horribly wrong. A pyrotechnic didn't fire the way it was supposed to, and unbeknownst to Jackson, the hair on the very top of his head was alight. It's believed that his hair gel and spray only fueled the fire further, and at first the crowd in attendance, as well as the filming crew, thought that it was part of the shot, but they were mistaken. Jackson kept dancing to the music, blissfully unaware of what was happening, until he started to feel pain on his scalp. When he started frantically...
There's a new movie about Michael Jackson coming out, and I saw the previews and it has this scene.
Trying to put out the flames by swatting at his head, crew members finally realized it wasn't part of the act, and they jumped in to assist. He suffered second and third degree burns to his scalp and underwent several surgeries as a result. It's believed that due to the incident, he became dependent on painkillers, and as the years passed, he would then become addicted to several other types of medication, leading many to believe that this incident played a crucial part in his strange behavior in the latter years of his life. People have also pointed out a strange coincidence regarding the incident: the fact that he was 25 years, 4 months, and 29 years old on that very day, and he would go on to live another 25 years, 4 months, and 29 days, meaning that this turning point came exactly at the halfway point of his life. The human body is an astonishing thing. For all that we've learned about our own physiology over the centuries, there are still many occurrences that we're unable to explain, such as why a person would suddenly be cured of a disease without receiving any treatment. Another good example concerns a 22-year-old woman named Jean Haynes, who was born with almost no hearing at all. She was forced to cope with life as a deaf child, but by the time she was an adult, she'd grown accustomed to it. But one day she had an allergic reaction to plastic foam, which triggered a bout of sneezing. This went on for almost 6 hours, until finally she gave one big sneeze, and to her disbelief, she could hear perfectly fine, and her hearing remained intact thereafter.
The shock of the sneeze must have adjusted something in her ears. That's interesting.
Then there's the curious case of Edwin Robinson, who at the age of 53 was involved in a truck accident, during which he sustained a head injury. In the months following the incident, he started noticing that his eyesight was deteriorating, as was his hearing. It became apparent that some kind of damage had been done, and he'd had to come to terms with the fact that he would eventually go blind and deaf. He had a hearing aid fitted and started learning to read Braille in preparation, and before long he did indeed lose his eyesight. Then, 9 years later, a storm started rolling in at his hometown in Falmouth in Maine, and he realized that his pet chicken was still outside. Worried that she'd get caught in the rain, he ventured outside using his aluminum cane to get around and started calling for the chicken that would always come running when she heard his voice. He then made his way under one of the trees in his yard, and before he knew it, he was knocked unconscious. When he came to after about 20 minutes of unconsciousness, he was at a loss as to what had happened at first, but he soon realized that he'd been struck by a lightning bolt, thanks to the storm that had arrived. He walked back to the house, rattled by the experience, and decided to lay down. Before long, he fell asleep, and when he woke up, he realized that he no longer had the strange sensation that he'd been living with for the last 9 years, which was feeling as though he was always wearing a baseball hat. In the days that followed, he realized he could read the time on his wall clock, though it would come in and out of focus. The next day, he saw his cat for the first time in 9 years, and his neighbor was shocked to see Edwin walking down his driveway without the aid of his cane. Before long, he started regaining his hearing.
I would call this a miracle.
And just a few weeks later, he didn't need it at all anymore. Doctors were completely baffled by the incident, but confirmed that Edwin was indeed no longer blind or deaf. John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer are two of the most notorious and famous serial killers to have ever lived. They both committed atrocious crimes against their victims, but were ultimately caught and made to pay for what they had done. Gacy was born in Chicago on the 17th of March, 1942. In the early 70s, he started working as a building contractor, but in his spare time, he appeared as Pogo the Clown at children's parties. At the same time, he was luring men to his house just outside of Chicago, where he would end their lives before disposing of their bodies. He first appeared on authorities' radar when Robert Priest went missing in Des Plaines. And in December of 1978, his house was searched, and the remains of some of his victims were found in the crawl space under the house. He was arrested and charged with the crime. And as the investigation continued, it quickly became apparent that he had many more victims, as many as 33. In March of 1980, he was found guilty of 33 murders and handed the death penalty. 14 years later, he was executed on the 10th of May, 1994, a date that coincides with two other notable events, one involving Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer was born in Milwaukee in 1960, and from a young age, he started exhibiting some worrying behavior. Despite this, he was reasonably popular in school since he enjoyed playing pranks and acting like the class clown. He ended the life of his first victim when he was just 18 years old in 1978. The crimes are too graphic to describe, but all in all, he ended the lives of 17 men over the course of 13 years before he was finally apprehended in 1991. He was sent to the Columbia Correctional Institution to serve the 16 life sentences that he'd received. But on the 28th of November, 1994, he was on his way to work detail when a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, attacked him with a metal bar and ended his life along with another inmate. But not many people are aware that Dahmer attempted to turn his life around while incarcerated, often being seen with a Bible in his hands and visiting with a minister named Roy Radcliffe. He would have.
And I hope that's true, and I hope it was sincere. But we know sometimes criminals are very manipulative, so.
Eventually asked Radcliffe to baptize him, which he did on the 10th of May, 1994.
And that still doesn't excuse you of the crimes. You have consequences for your actions.
In a bizarre coincidence that was later pointed out, this is the very day that John Wayne Gacy was executed. And to make matters even more ominous, it was also the same day that a solar eclipse took place. Many see this as more than just a coincidence, since it marked the end of the life of one serial killer, but also the rebirth of another who had chosen to turn to Christianity in the aftermath of the horrible acts that he had carried out. The two events may not truly be linked, but to many, it serves as a reminder that even those who we consider to be the most wicked have the opportunity to change the path they're on before it's too late. We all know that winning the lottery is a most unlikely event. Even if someone were to buy a ticket for every lottery draw in their lifetime, the chances are that they'll never win the big prize. And even if they do, they might have to split it with several other winners who chose the same numbers. Nevertheless, millions of people play the lottery in their respective countries every week in hopes that they'll strike it lucky by winning a life-changing amount of money. And sometimes this does happen. On the 7th of November 2022, a man named Edwin Castro won the US's largest lottery jackpot, a staggering $2.04 billion, after buying a Powerball ticket from Joe's service station in Altadena, California. Unsurprisingly, no other details about the winner were released. But sometimes the lottery draw can cause some controversy. In October of 2022, people in Singapore bought their grand lotto tickets in hopes of winning 236 million Philippine pesos, which converts to about $4 million US. When the numbers were drawn later that evening, people were surprised to find that all the numbers were multiples of 9. namely 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, and 54. It seemed like an uncannily strange event, and immediately people started calling for an investigation, since the chances of this ever happening were extremely low. But there was another surprise in store regarding the same draw. When the results of the draw were announced, people were even more taken aback when they learned that 440 people had played those exact numbers, and that they would all be sharing part of the jackpot.
Wow.
This was the first time that such a high number of people had won the Grand Lotto, and they each walked away
Something's
with
not
about
right.
545,000 pesos.
I would say that's not a coincidence. I mean, I guess it could be. It's an astronomical event.
The equivalent of about $9,000, a far cry from the $4 million that would have been paid to a single winner.
Wow.
People were immediately suspicious that the draw had been fixed somehow, and the Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office launched an investigation. Once the winners started coming forward and being identified, it became clear that there had been no tampering and that the uncanny numbers that had been drawn were mere coincidence. But many people remained skeptical, not only because the numbers were multiples of 9, but because they found it hard to believe that so many people would choose to play these 6 numbers, since it would severely reduce their chances of winning anything at all. Nonetheless, the money was paid out, and the Philippine government released a statement saying that the matter had been put to rest and that there would be no further investigation. Sachin Tendulkar and Virat Kohli.
All right. If you want to see this video in its entirety, you can go to Top 5 Unknowns. It's the 40 strangest coincidences. And I really enjoyed this one. It was interesting. I hope you did too. Let me know where you're watching from. Comment below. I'd really love to know. And in the meantime, I hope you have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.